The moment I pull up to Hampton Manor, a familiar chill settles in my chest. Not from the cold December air, but from something deeper, something that's been there for as long as I can remember. From the outside, the house is picturesque, adorned with twinkling lights that cast a warm glow against the winter sky. A perfectly curated Christmas postcard. But to me, it has always felt like a stage where we perform our roles, never deviating from the script. I grip the steering wheel, taking a slow breath. I should be used to this by now. 32 years old, yet somehow, the second I cross that threshold, I will be reduced to the youngest child, the one who never quite measured up. It doesn't matter that I've built a career, carved out a life for myself far from their expectations. In this house, success is measured differently, by the weight of a wedding ring, the number of children clinging to your legs, the ability to uphold tradition without question. I step out of the car, adjusting my coat as my breath fogs in front of me. The driveway is packed, as expected. Marcus is already here, no doubt reigning over the festivities like the self-appointed heir to the throne. Sophie will be inside too, bouncing her baby on her hip, wearing that effortless air of domestic bliss. And, of course, my parents, Margaret and Thomas, presiding over everything, ensuring the illusion of a perfect family remains intact. The heavy wooden doors creak open before I can knock, revealing the grand entryway bathed in golden light. The scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey fills the air, mingling with the hum of conversation and the distant jingle of Christmas music. The moment I step inside, I brace myself. "Charlotte, there you are." My mother's voice rings out, her smile perfectly rehearsed. The same smile she's worn my entire life, the one that never quite reaches her eyes. "Hi, Mom," I say, forcing a polite smile as she leans in for a quick hug, one that feels more obligatory than warm. "Cutting it close, aren't you? Everyone else has been here for hours." Of course, they have. And of course, I am the one whose timing is noted. Not Marcus, who likely arrived just moments before me but will still be praised for his dedication to the family. Not Sophie, who could do no wrong in their eyes. Just me. I got caught up with work, I lie, not wanting to give them any more ammunition. My mother tuts, but says nothing, her eyes already scanning me, looking for something to critique. My hair, my clothes, my lack of a +1. When she finds nothing obvious, she simply gestures toward the living room. "Go on, everyone's in there." I take a steadying breath and step inside. The room is just as I remember, elegantly decorated, the massive Christmas tree gleaming with carefully arranged ornaments. A fire crackles in the oversized stone hearth, casting flickering shadows across the polished floors. And, as expected, my siblings are already performing their parts flawlessly. Marcus sits in the grand leather chair, one arm draped over the back as he sips from a glass of brandy, his wife perched beside him, chatting with my mother. Sophie is curled up on the couch, baby in her lap, her husband rubbing her shoulder with casual affection. Their laughter is easy, their smiles bright. And then there's me. "Charlotte." Marcus acknowledges me with a nod, his tone bordering on dismissive. "You made it." "I did." I force a smile, stepping further inside, the warmth of the fire doing little to ease the tension creeping up my spine. Sophie looks up, her expression genuinely pleasant. "It's good to see you." "You too," I reply, appreciating the one small mercy. Sophie has always been the least harsh, though never quite willing to stand up against the tide. "Still single?" Marcus asks casually, taking another sip of his drink. And there it is. The first jab. I arch a brow, keeping my voice even. "Still prying into things that aren't your business?" His wife chuckles softly, but Marcus merely smirks. "Just asking. You know how Mom worries." I know. I know exactly how she worries. About my future, about my ability to settle down, about what people will think when they see her daughter standing alone while everyone else has paired off. Before I can formulate a response, my father's voice cuts through the room. "Dinner's ready. Everyone to the table." Saved by the bell. I follow them into the dining room, where the long mahogany table is set with fine china, crystal glasses reflecting the glow of the chandelier above. Everything is perfectly arranged, as it always is. The adult table. the family table. And then, in the corner, an afterthought, a smaller, mismatched table with paper plates and plastic cups. A makeshift station where children are already clambering into their seats. I hesitate, frowning slightly. "Charlotte, dear," my mother's voice comes from behind me, too light, too smooth. "Why don't you sit over there?" I turn to her, my stomach dropping. "At the kids' table?" She nods, entirely unbothered. "It just makes sense. The main table is full. The main table is full." I look at the perfectly arranged seats, at the empty place settings that could have easily been adjusted. And then I look at the kids' table, the scattered chairs, the juice boxes, the half-eaten cookies already smeared across the surface. My chest tightens, heat rushing to my face. They don't see me as one of them. Not really. Not ever. But I say nothing. With a tight smile, I pull out a chair and sit. I sit at the kids' table, my back stiff, my hands resting in my lap as a chorus of giggles and high-pitched chatter fills the space around me. A toddler beside me slaps his tiny hands against the plastic cup in front of him, sending a splash of apple juice onto the already sticky tablecloth. A 7-year-old across from me swings his legs wildly beneath his chair, humming a Christmas tune-off key between bites of mashed potatoes. The table is chaos. An explosion of scattered silverware, crumbs, and half-eaten rolls. I swallow, my jaw tight as I steal a glance at the main dining table. The difference is stark. The long, polished surface gleams under the chandelier, fine china and crystal catching the warm glow. Perfectly plated portions of food rest before each person, conversations flowing smoothly, laughter ringing out in polite waves. At the head of the table, Marcus sits comfortably, leaning back in his chair, his wine glass half raised as he speaks. Even from here, I can see the smugness in his expression, the effortless way he commands the room. His wife nods along, Sophie smiles warmly, her baby nestled in her lap while her husband feeds her carefully from his plate. My parents, regal as ever, sit across from them, their presence unchallenged, their authority absolute. And then, there's me. Banished to the far corner like a distant cousin instead of their own daughter and sister. I take a slow, steadying breath, pushing down the sharp sting of humiliation creeping up my throat. I shouldn't be surprised. This is how it's always been. Marcus, the firstborn, the leader. Sophie, the golden child, the perfect mother. And me, Charlotte, the youngest, the odd one out. The one who, despite everything I had accomplished, still did not fit into the carefully arranged hierarchy of our family. I glanced down at my plate, a mismatched dish, smeared with gravy, my serving portion haphazardly scooped onto it. I don't belong here. I never have, but I've spent years trying to squeeze myself into a place that was never truly mine. One of the younger kids next to me, a cousin I barely know, tugs on my sleeve. "Do you like dinosaurs?" he asks, his face smudged with cranberry sauce. I blink at him. Sure." His eyes light up as he immediately launches into a monologue about his favorite dinosaurs, gesturing wildly as he speaks, nearly knocking over my glass of water in the process. I barely listen. My attention is fixed on my mother, who sits comfortably at the main table, completely unbothered by what she's just done. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident or an oversight. It was deliberate. They had chosen to place me here. And that realization settles in my chest like a heavy weight. At the main table, Marcus throws his head back in laughter at something my father says. The sound grates against my ears, a reminder that he is exactly where he is supposed to be. They all are. They fit into this world, into the traditions and expectations that define this family. But me? I am nothing more than an inconvenience. A reminder of what they don't understand, what they don't approve of. And they make sure I know it. As if sensing my thoughts, Sophie's gaze flickers toward me. Her lips press together, her brows knitting slightly, maybe an apology, maybe pity. But she says nothing. She never does. Margaret glances my way, offering a small, dismissive smile, as if I should be grateful just to be here. I grip the edges of my chair, my fingers digging into the worn wood. I could stay silent. I could swallow it down, force another polite smile, pretend like it doesn't matter, like I always do. Or I could do something I've never done before. As if on cue, Marcus leans forward, raising his glass. A toast, he announces, his voice carrying over the chatter. To family, to traditions, and to knowing your place in them. His eyes flick to me, just for a second, amusement dancing in their depths. And something inside me snaps. I don't wait for them to raise their glasses. I don't wait for the clinking of crystal, the murmured agreement, the self-satisfied smiles. I push my chair back. The legs scrape against the floor, the sharp sound cutting through the room like a knife. For the first time tonight, all eyes are on me. I rise to my feet, my movements slow, controlled, but my heart pounds furiously against my ribs. Margaret frowns. Charlotte, dear, where are you going? I reach for my coat draped over the back of the chair, slipping it on with careful precision. I think I've had enough, I say, my voice even, calm. My father's expression darkens. Charlotte, sit down. But I don't. I move around the table, past the children who barely notice my departure, past the adults whose eyes widen in disbelief. My pulse roars in my ears, adrenaline flooding my veins. Sophie opens her mouth as if to say something, but no words come. Margaret's face twists into something between irritation and confusion. You can't just leave. It's Christmas. I pause at the doorway, glancing over my shoulder one last time. I know, I say simply. And then, without another word, I walk out. The cold night air hits me the moment I step outside, sharp and biting against my flushed skin. My breath escapes in rapid clouds as I walk across the stone path leading to the driveway, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. The sound of muffled laughter and clinking glasses seeps through the walls of Hampton Manor, a cruel contrast to the storm raging inside me. I grip the edges of my coat tighter around myself, trying to steady my breathing. I don't know exactly where I'm going, I just know I can't stay here. Not after that. The kids' table. The insult lingers, sharp and humiliating. They didn't just dismiss me, they diminished me. Reduced me to an afterthought, as if my entire existence had no weight in this family. As if I hadn't built a life of my own, a career I was proud of, a sense of independence they would never understand. And yet, none of it mattered. Not to them. I dig into my pocket, pulling out my car keys with stiff fingers. My hands are shaking, but whether from anger or the cold, I can't tell. As I unlock the door, I hear the front door swing open behind me. Charlotte. Margaret's voice. I close my eyes for a moment, forcing myself to take a slow breath. Of course, she followed me. Charlotte, what are you doing? She demands, her heels clicking against the stone steps as she approaches. Dinner isn't even finished. I turn around slowly, meeting her gaze. Her face is drawn into a look of exasperation, her arms folded tightly over her chest as if I'm a child throwing a tantrum. That look alone makes my teeth clench. I know, I say, my voice steady, though my chest still burns with frustration. Then come back inside, she says as if it's that simple. As if this is just a minor inconvenience, something I should brush off like I always have. You're making a scene. A scene. That's what this is to her. Not an insult, not a cruel dismissal, just an inconvenience. I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. Do you even hear yourself, Mom? Her brows knit together in confusion, as if she truly doesn't understand why I would be upset. And that only makes it worse. I was put at the kids' table, I say, my voice sharper now. Like some distant cousin's child they didn't have room for. And none of you thought twice about it. Margaret sighs, rubbing her temple as if she's the one who should be frustrated. Charlotte, it's just a seating arrangement. Don't be so dramatic. I stare at her in disbelief. Dramatic? I repeat, my voice quieter now, but no less firm. Do you even realize how that felt? Sitting there, watching all of you at the main table, laughing and drinking like I wasn't even worth making space for. She exhales heavily, shaking her head. It wasn't meant to be personal. But it was. My words hang in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. For a moment, she just looks at me. And then, in that carefully measured way of hers, she exhales and straightens her shoulders. Charlotte, you're the youngest. That's just how things are. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. That's just how things are, I repeat, tasting the words on my tongue. The absolute dismissal of them. The finality. She has no idea what she's just admitted. This isn't an accident. It's not an oversight. It's a choice. A choice they've made every single year to keep me in my place. And I'm done. I take a step back, gripping my car door. I'm leaving. Margaret's lips press into a thin line. Charlotte, don't be ridiculous. No, I say, shaking my head. Not this time. She watches me, her expression unreadable now. Where will you even go? That question lingers, but only for a second. Anywhere but here, I say simply. I pull open the car door and slide in, my fingers gripping the steering wheel before I even put the key in the ignition. Margaret doesn't move. She stands there, her arms still crossed, her face still set in that carefully constructed mask. She won't chase me. She won't beg me to stay. That's not who she is. She'll go back inside, shake her head at the table, tell them I'm being overly sensitive again. And they'll all nod and agree. But I don't care. I start the car, the engine roaring to life beneath me. Without another glance, I put it in reverse and pull out of the driveway, leaving the grand, perfect manor behind. I don't know exactly where I'm going, but for the first time in years, I feel like I finally have control over my own Christmas. And that is enough. The road stretches ahead of me, dark and empty, the hum of my car engine the only sound filling the quiet night. I grip the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white, as I drive with no real destination in mind. The adrenaline is still there, thrumming in my veins, a mix of anger and relief battling for control inside me. I've never done this before, never walked away, never left them sitting at that perfect table, staring after me in shock. I should feel guilty. I should feel regret. But all I feel is free. The streetlights blur past in streaks of gold, the Christmas decorations lining the town glowing softly against the black sky. Wreaths hang from lampposts, and store windows twinkle with strings of lights, holiday displays frozen behind glass. Everything looks festive, warm, inviting. A contrast to the cold ache in my chest. I exhale, my breath shaky as I reach for my phone resting in the passenger seat. I don't know why I check it. Maybe habit. Maybe curiosity. Maybe some stupid, lingering hope that one of them, Sophie, maybe, sent a message that actually sounded like they understood. But I already know what I'll find. Missed calls. A flood of unread texts. I glance down quickly, just long enough to see the names lighting up the screen. Marcus. Sophie. Dad. And, of course, Margaret. I don't open them. I don't need to. I already know exactly what they say. Where are you? Come back inside. Stop being dramatic. Charlotte, this isn't funny. My grip tightens on the wheel. I roll to a stop at a red light, my reflection staring back at me in the rearview mirror. My face is pale, my eyes wide, my expression unreadable even to myself. For so many years, I've sat at that table, smiling through their condescension, pretending their jabs and dismissals didn't cut as deep as they did. I've let them dictate who I am supposed to be, where I fit, how I should live my life. And for what? To be shoved aside, treated like I don't belong? The light turns green. I don't hesitate. I drive. Minutes turn into miles, and before I know it, I'm pulling into the parking lot of a small diner on the outskirts of town. The neon sign flickers, casting a faint blue glow over the wet pavement. Maple Diner, a place I haven't been to in years. I park, exhaling slowly as I shut off the engine. The silence is deafening. The moment I step inside, the scent of coffee and fried food wraps around me, grounding me in something real, something familiar. The place is quiet, a handful of people scattered across booths and counter stools, their voices low and easy. A waitress with tired eyes and a warm smile glances up from behind the counter. "Take a seat wherever you'd like, Han," she says, wiping her hands on her apron. I nod, sliding into a booth near the window. The vinyl seat is cracked, the tabletop slightly sticky, but I don't care. It feels better than anything back at Hampton Manor. A few moments later, the waitress, her name tag reads Linda, comes over, a notepad in hand. "Rough night?" she asks, her voice kind but knowing. I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. "Something like that." She smiles, nodding like she understands. "Coffee?" "Yes, please." She walks away, and I lean back against the booth, staring out the window as the snow begins to fall in slow, lazy flakes. My phone vibrates again, but I don't reach for it. Not yet. A few minutes later, Linda returns, setting a steaming mug in front of me. "Need a menu?" I shake my head. "Just the coffee for now." "Thank you." She nods, giving me space, and I wrap my hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into my frozen fingers. For the first time tonight, the tension in my chest loosens just a little. I take a sip, closing my eyes for a moment. And then, the buzzing of my phone starts again. I sigh, setting my mug down, finally reaching for it. 17 new messages. I scroll through them, my pulse steady now. "Marcus, you're overreacting. Come back before you make this worse than it is. Sophie, Charlotte, please." I know Mom was harsh, but she didn't mean anything by it. "Dad, enough. Get back here." "Margaret, Charlotte, you're being selfish. This isn't about you. You're ruining Christmas for everyone." I stare at that last one, something sharp twisting in my gut. Of course, that's how she sees it. Me leaving isn't about how they treated me, it's about how I made them look. About how I disrupted their perfect little holiday. I should respond. I should defend myself. Instead, I swipe to my camera roll. I scroll back, years and years, until I find it. A Christmas photo from when I was 17. The whole family dressed in matching outfits, gathered in front of the grand tree at Hampton Manor. Everyone is perfectly posed, Margaret and Thomas standing tall in the center, Marcus and Sophie beaming beside them, their partners at their sides. And me, shoved to the edge, barely in the frame. An afterthought. I stare at it for a long moment, the lump in my throat threatening to rise. Then, with steady fingers, I post it to the family group chat. Here's to the perfect family, always making sure the youngest one knows their place. I set the phone down and take another sip of my coffee, waiting for the chaos to begin. The moment I press send, I set my phone down, flipping it screen side down on the table. I don't need to watch the messages flood in. I know they will. I know the family group chat will explode with reactions, indignation from Marcus, feigned concern from Sophie, outright fury from my father. And Margaret, well, she'll be livid. But for the first time, I don't care. I take a slow sip of my coffee, staring out the diner window as snow drifts softly under the streetlights. The world outside feels quiet, peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in my phone. It's strange. After all the years of biting my tongue, swallowing my anger, pretending that their words and actions didn't cut deep, I expected to feel anxious. But all I feel is something close to relief. The diner remains calm, the low murmur of voices blending with the clink of silverware against plates. Across the room, an elderly couple shares a plate of pie, speaking in soft, affectionate tones. At the counter, a man in a heavy coat nurses a cup of black coffee, his gaze lost in thought. The warmth of the space seeps into me, grounding me in the present, away from the cold, rigid world of Hampton Manor. My phone vibrates. Then again. And again. I don't move to check it. Instead, I reach for a sugar packet, tearing it open and stirring it into my coffee with deliberate slowness. I let them wait. A waitress passes by, pausing at my table with a kind smile. "Need anything else, hon?" I shake my head. "No, thank you. Just the coffee." She nods and moves on, and I take another sip, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue before I finally flip my phone over. 24 new messages. I exhale through my nose, bracing myself as I open the group chat. "Marcus, are you serious right now?" "Sophie, Charlotte, what are you doing?" "Dad, enough. Call me. Now." "Margaret, Charlotte. This is unacceptable. You're being cruel." "Marcus, take that post down. Sophie, please, just talk to us. Margaret, do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? Family isn't supposed to humiliate each other. I let out a quiet laugh at that. Family isn't supposed to humiliate each other? That's rich, coming from them. I scroll back up to the photo I sent, the one from years ago where I had been shoved to the very edge, barely in the frame. I know they hate that I posted it. Not because it's inaccurate, but because it's proof. Proof of what I've always been to them, an afterthought. I hesitate for only a moment before typing a reply. Funny. I thought you all loved tradition. I hit send. Immediately, the chat bubbles appear, dots bouncing as multiple family members start typing. Sophie's message comes first. Sophie. Come on, Charlotte. I know you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle it. I exhale, shaking my head. Sophie, the peacekeeper. Always gently urging me to smooth things over, to keep the peace at the expense of my own feelings. Marcus is next. Marcus, you're acting like a child. Be an adult and talk to us instead of throwing a tantrum online. Of course, he'd say that. Because to Marcus, standing up for myself is a tantrum. To Marcus, my silence is what's expected, and anything outside of that is an overreaction. Dad, this isn't funny, Charlotte. Come back home and stop making a scene. A scene. That's what I've always been to them. A problem to be managed. A complication in their otherwise perfect image. And then, Margaret's message finally comes through. Margaret, Charlotte, you're breaking my heart. This is not how family treats each other. I stare at the screen, my fingers tightening around the phone. Not how family treats each other. I think back to all the times they laughed at me for being different. The years they dismissed my accomplishments because they didn't fit into their version of success. The condescending smiles, the patronizing remarks, the way they always made sure I knew I didn't quite belong at the main table. I inhale sharply and type a response before I can second-guess myself. No, Mom. This is exactly how our family treats each other. I just finally decided to return the favor. I send it and then, before I can read whatever defensive, guilt-tripping response she's bound to type next, I do something I've never done before. I mute the group chat. The second I do, an unexpected weight lifts off my chest. The diner hums around me, peaceful and steady, as I slide my phone onto the table and pick up my coffee once more. The messages will keep coming, but for once, I won't let them consume me. Instead, I watch the snow falling outside, and for the first time in years, Christmas doesn't feel like something I have to survive. It feels like the start of something new. I step out of the diner into the crisp night air, the snow falling in soft, silent waves around me. The world feels still, untouched, like a fresh start waiting to happen. My breath clouds in front of me as I glance at my phone again, rereading Lena's message with the party address. A different Christmas. A new beginning. I hesitate for only a second before I climb into my car and type the address into my GPS. It's not far, just across town in a neighborhood I don't know well. I put the car into drive, pulling onto the road, feeling the familiar tension of family obligations slip further behind me with every mile. The streets are quiet, lined with houses glowing in soft Christmas lights, some windows flickering with the warm colors of a Christmas tree tucked inside. This is what the holiday is supposed to feel like, peaceful, inviting. Not an interrogation, not a performance. As I pull up to the house, I see cars parked along the street, the muffled sound of music and laughter drifting from inside. Warm light spills from the windows, and for the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm about to walk into a room where I have to defend myself. I take a steady breath and step out of the car, brushing a few snowflakes from my coat before heading up the steps. The door swings open before I even knock. Charlotte. Lena grins, pulling me into a hug before I can react. She smells like cinnamon and something floral, and her embrace is warm, familiar, grounding. I wasn't sure if you'd actually come, she says, pulling back to look at me. I let out a breathy laugh. Honestly, me neither. She beams. Well, come in. You need a drink. And food. And probably a Christmas cookie or two. She tugs me inside, and instantly, the warmth of the house wraps around me like a comfort I didn't know I needed. The living room is alive with conversation and laughter. A Christmas tree stands tall in the corner, decorated with mismatched ornaments that feel personal, real. People are scattered around the space, some sitting on the couch, others standing near the fireplace, drinks in hand, chatting easily. The atmosphere is effortless, unforced. Lena hands me a drink, something warm, spiced, with a cinnamon stick swirling inside. Hot toddy, she says with a wink. Trust me, it'll fix anything. I take a careful sip, the heat and spice settling in my chest, thawing the last of the cold that clung to me from earlier. She leads me to a group by the fireplace, introducing me without hesitation. Guys, this is Charlotte. She just escaped a terrible family Christmas, so be extra nice. A few people laugh, some nodding in understanding. A guy with dark curls raises his glass. To breaking free, he toasts. To breaking free, I echo, smiling as I take another sip of my drink. It's strange how easy it is to settle in here. No prying questions about my personal life, no judgmental glances at my empty ring finger. Just conversation, warmth, and the quiet relief of knowing I don't have to explain myself. At one point, I find myself curled up on the couch, a plate of food balanced in my lap as I listen to the people around me trade stories about Christmas disasters, burned dinners, tangled Christmas lights, gifts gone wrong. They laugh, shake their heads, pour each other more drinks. There's no expectation to be perfect here. For the first time in years, I don't feel out of place on Christmas. My phone buzzes in my pocket, and for a moment, I debate ignoring it. But something makes me check. Sophie, I get it, Charlotte. I really do. But are you sure this is how you want to handle things? I stare at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. I know what she's trying to do. Be the voice of reason, play the middle ground. But the truth is, there is no middle ground. There never was. I take a deep breath and type a response. Me, for once, yes. I'm exactly where I want to be. I send it, then turn my phone on silent. The music shifts, someone turning up a classic Christmas song, and Lena plops down beside me, nudging my shoulder. You good? I glance around the room, the laughter, the warmth, the easy acceptance. Then I smile, taking another sip of my drink. I'm perfect. I sink deeper into the couch, the warmth of the room wrapping around me like a long-forgotten comfort. Laughter hums in the background, glasses clinking, the faint scent of cinnamon and pine filling the air. Outside, the snow continues to fall in soft, lazy spirals, blanketing the world in quiet, but inside, the party feels alive. For the first time in years, Christmas doesn't feel like something I have to endure. It feels like something I get to experience. Lena nudges my arm. You sure you don't need another drink? She waves her nearly empty glass at me with a grin. I shake my head, smiling. No, I'm good. But I'm not gonna stop you. She laughs and pushes off the couch, heading toward the kitchen, and I take the opportunity to just breathe. To let myself sit here, in this moment, without the weight of expectation pressing on my shoulders. I glance down at my phone, still muted, still filled with unread messages from my family. It's been over an hour since I last checked, but the fact that Sophie is the only one who has reached out in anything resembling a reasonable way lingers in my mind. Margaret is probably furious. My father has likely gone from irritation to disappointment by now. And Marcus, well, Marcus has never had the capacity to see things outside his own perspective. I tilt my head back, exhaling slowly. What happens now? I made my statement. I walked away. But what comes after? Do I just keep going, pretending none of it mattered? Or do I wait for the inevitable fallout, the guilt trip that will come in waves, the pressure to make things right, even though I'm not the one who made them wrong in the first place? I don't have the answers. All I know is that for the first time, I made a choice that was mine. And it feels right. I'm about to tuck my phone back into my pocket when it buzzes again. I hesitate, then glance at the screen. Sophie, Charlotte, I know Mom and Dad aren't handling this well, but can we talk? Just us? I chew on my lip, debating. Sophie has always been the least harsh, the one who tried, in her own quiet way, to soften things for me. But she was also complicit. She never stood up for me, never pushed back against the way they treated me. And I don't know if that makes her better than them, or just another part of the problem. Still, she's reaching out. And I don't want to ignore her. I sigh and type a response. Me, I'll think about it. I send it before I can overanalyze, then tuck my phone away. Across the room, someone turns up the music, the classic hum of an old Christmas song filling the space. I smile as Lena returns, sliding onto the couch beside me with a fresh drink in hand. Okay, she says, setting it down on the coffee table before turning to me with a dramatic flair. Tell me something, what's the best Christmas you've ever had? I blink, caught off guard. Best? Yeah, she says, pulling her legs up beneath her. A memory. Something that actually felt good. Doesn't have to be big, just something real. I open my mouth, then close it, frowning slightly. Do I have one? So many of my Christmas memories are tangled with discomfort, with being the odd one out, with pretending that I fit in a family that never really saw me. But as I dig through the layers of strained smiles and forced traditions, something surfaces. A moment. I exhale softly. When I was a kid, maybe 10 or 11, I snuck downstairs in the middle of the night on Christmas Eve. Lena grins. Classic. I chuckle, nodding. I don't know. I couldn't sleep. I wanted to see the tree when it was all quiet, you know? Without the chaos. Her smile softens. Yeah. I lean back, my fingers tracing the edge of my glass absent-mindedly. I remember sitting there in the dark, just watching the lights twinkle. It was the only time Christmas felt peaceful. Like it was just for me. Not about impressing anyone or keeping up appearances. Just magic, I guess. Lena watches me, something understanding in her expression. That sounds perfect. It was, I admit, my chest tightening just a little. But the next morning, it was back to business as usual. The perfect family, the roles we all had to play. She tilts her head. And now, I glance around the room, at the warmth, the laughter, the way nobody here is asking me to be anything other than exactly who I am. I take a deep breath, then smile. Now, I think I get to make my own kind of Christmas. Lena clinks her glass against mine. To that, I raise my drink with a quiet laugh, and for the first time in a long time, I believe it. The party hums around me, laughter blending with the soft hum of Christmas music. The warmth from the fireplace flickers across the room, casting gentle shadows against the walls. I sink deeper into the couch, the remnants of my drink resting between my fingers, ice clinking softly against the glass as I swirl it absent-mindedly. For the first time in years, I feel untethered from expectation. I don't have to perform here. I don't have to prove my worth. I get to just be. Across the room, Lena is in the middle of an animated conversation with a guy in a ridiculous Christmas sweater, both of them laughing over something I missed. She catches my eye and gives me a quick, knowing grin before turning back to her conversation. I exhale, rolling my shoulders as I lean back against the couch. The tension that has lived in my body for years feels looser. Then my phone vibrates. I hesitate. I know it's from them. I know the second I flip it over, the weight of their words will try to pull me back into their orbit. I could ignore it. I should ignore it. But I don't. I pick it up, unlocking the screen with a slow inhale. Sophie, Charlotte, I get it. Please, let's talk. I chew on the inside of my cheek, rereading the words. No guilt tripping. No accusations. Just an ask. A small part of me wants to dismiss it. Sophie has always played the neutral role, the quiet enabler. But another part of me knows that if there's anyone in that house who might actually listen, it's her. I hesitate for only a second before I type back. Me, I'll think about it. I hit send, staring at the message for a moment before locking my phone and setting it aside. I'm not ready for that conversation, not tonight. But maybe soon. The night drifts on, and at some point, Lena slides into the seat beside me, handing me a fresh drink. All right, she says, settling in. Tell me what's on your mind. I smirk, lifting a brow. Do I look like I'm deep in thought? You look like you're either planning an escape or debating the meaning of life. Either way, I want to hear it. I chuckle, shaking my head. I was just thinking about Sophie. Lena makes a face. The sister, right? I nod. She texted me. Said she gets it and wants to talk. Lena hums, taking a slow sip of her drink before tilting her head at me. And I don't know. I exhale, shifting in my seat. She's never been the worst. But she's never really stood up for me either. She just lets it happen. Lena nods thoughtfully. That's a tough one. Did you want to talk to her? I pause, considering. Maybe I admit. But not if it's just to convince me to go back. Lena shrugs. Then make that clear. If she actually gets it, she'll respect that. I chew on my lip, nodding. Maybe Lena is right. Maybe if Sophie is reaching out, it's because she finally sees what I've always known. Or maybe it's just another attempt to pull me back in. Either way, the decision is mine. And that, in itself, feels like a victory. I lean back, glancing at the clock. It's almost midnight. Christmas Eve is slipping into Christmas morning, and for the first time in years, I don't feel suffocated by it. Lena nudges my shoulder. Hey, Merry Christmas. I glance at her, then around the warm, imperfect room, where people are still talking, still laughing, still celebrating in the way that feels real instead of forced. And for the first time, I smile. Merry Christmas, Lena. The drive home is quiet, the streets dusted in fresh snow, untouched by morning traffic. The warmth of Lena's party still lingers in my chest, but now, alone in my car, reality begins to creep back in. The messages from my family. Sophie's plea to talk. The inevitable confrontation waiting for me when I finally decide to face them. I tighten my grip on the steering wheel, my headlights cutting through the early morning fog. My mind keeps circling back to Sophie's message, Charlotte, I get it. Please, let's talk. She gets it. What does that even mean? I want to believe she understands why I walked out. I want to believe she sees what I've endured all these years. But part of me wonders if this is just another attempt to pull me back in, to smooth things over without actually fixing anything. That's how it always goes, isn't it? Every time I've tried to express myself, my family has twisted it into something else, accusing me of being too sensitive, too selfish, too difficult. And for so long, I believed them. I let them convince me that the problem was me. But it's not. And I won't go back to playing the role they've written for me. Still, Sophie is different. She's never been the worst. And maybe, just maybe, she's trying to reach out in a way that actually means something. By the time I pull into my driveway, the decision has settled somewhere deep in my chest. I'll talk to her. Not today. Not right now. But soon. I step out of the car, pulling my coat tighter around me as the cold bites at my skin. The world is still, untouched in the early morning light. I pause for a moment, taking it all in. For the first time in years, I spent Christmas on my terms. No forced smiles. No pretending. No suffocating weight of disappointment pressing down on me. Just laughter, warmth, and the quiet understanding that I don't have to belong to a family that refuses to see me. I unlock my door and step inside, exhaling as I shrug off my coat. The silence of my apartment is a welcome contrast to the chaos of Hampton Manor. There's no grand Christmas tree, no perfectly arranged table settings, no forced perfection. Just the soft glow of the small string lights I'd put up last week and the cozy stillness of my own space. I make my way to the kitchen, setting my keys down on the counter before reaching for my phone. One unread message from Sophie. I hesitate before opening it. Sophie, I know you don't trust me to understand, but I do. And I just want to talk. No guilt, no pressure. Just me and you. My chest tightens. She's never said anything like that before. For a long moment, I stare at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then, slowly, I type a response. Me, not today. But soon. I send it before I can change my mind. Then I set my phone down and pour myself a cup of coffee, settling into the quiet peace of my own home. For the first time, Christmas doesn't feel like something I need to survive. It feels like a beginning. The next morning, I wake up to the soft glow of winter light seeping through my bedroom window. The world outside is quiet, blanketed in fresh snow. For a moment, I just lie there, wrapped in the warmth of my blankets, letting the stillness settle around me. It's Christmas morning, and for the first time in my life, I don't feel the crushing weight of obligation. No hurried preparations, no forced smiles, no sitting at a table where I am merely tolerated instead of included. Just peace. I stretch, letting out a slow breath before reaching for my phone. It's a habit I haven't quite broken, but as I unlock the screen, I prepare myself for whatever messages might be waiting. Only one new notification catches my eye. Sophie, thank you. That's it. Just 2 words. I stare at them, turning them over in my mind. Thank you for what? For not shutting her out completely? For giving her a chance to talk? For finally standing up for myself in a way that forced her to acknowledge it? Whatever the reason, I don't reply. Not yet. Instead, I climb out of bed, padding to the kitchen where the scent of coffee fills the air. I pour myself a cup, taking a slow sip as I glance around my apartment. The space is small, simple, but it's mine. No grand decorations, no perfectly staged Christmas tree, just a single strand of lights along the bookshelf and a candle that smells faintly of cinnamon. And somehow it's enough. I curl up on the couch, tucking my legs beneath me, my mug warm between my hands. Outside, the snow falls softly, the city moving at its own quiet pace. This Christmas is different. And it's the first one that actually belongs to me. The thought settles in my chest, solid and real. I spend the morning in quiet solitude, flipping through an old book, watching the snow fall through the window, letting the silence stretch in a way that doesn't feel empty. By noon, my phone buzzes again. Not Sophie this time. Dad, Charlotte, we need to talk. You're going to regret this. I blink at the screen, my heart rate picking up slightly. There it is. The shift. I knew it was coming, knew that eventually my family would move from dismissal to outright command. I exhale through my nose, shaking my head. Regret? The only thing I regret is not standing up for myself sooner. For years, I have let them dictate my place in this family, let them push me to the edges, let them make me feel like I was less. But they don't get to do that anymore. I don't respond. I let the message sit there, unanswered, and instead of engaging, I take another slow sip of my coffee. Then, a few minutes later, another call. Margaret. I stare at the screen as it rings, my fingers tightening around my mug. I know exactly what she will say. I can already hear her voice, calm but cutting, twisting the situation until I am the villain, until my pain is an inconvenience instead of something real. I let the call go to voicemail. And then, without a second thought, I do something I've never done before. I block her number. The second I do, a strange sense of lightness washes over me. No more calls. No more guilt trips disguised as concern. No more being made to feel small. I breathe in deeply, feeling something shift inside me. I have always been the afterthought. The extra seat at the table. The one expected to shrink, to fit into the role they assigned me. But not anymore. This Christmas, I chose myself. And for the first time, that feels like enough. I set my phone down, exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Blocking Margaret should feel like a drastic step, but instead, it feels like relief. Like I finally cut the last string tying me to an expectation I no longer want to meet. I sip my coffee slowly, letting the warmth spread through me as I stare out the window. The snow has thickened, the streets blanketed in white, undisturbed except for a few tire tracks leading out of the neighborhood. There's a stillness to the world today, a kind of quiet I've never allowed myself to embrace on Christmas. For the first time, the holiday isn't about performance. It's about me. I curl up on the couch, pulling a blanket over my lap, flipping through the pages of the book I abandoned earlier. But my mind keeps drifting back to everything that's happened in the last 24 hours. The moment I walked out of Hampton Manor, the texts, Sophie's message, and now, my father's last attempt to make me feel guilty. You're going to regret this. I shake my head, setting my book aside. Regret? For what? Finally standing up for myself? Refusing to be placed at the kids' table, not just physically, but emotionally? Walking away from people who have never made space for me, not in a real way? No. The only regret I have is that it took me this long to leave. My phone buzzes again, and for a moment, I almost don't check it. But something tells me to, and when I glance at the screen, it's not Margaret. Not my father. It's Sophie. Sophie, I mean it, Charlotte. I get it. And I just want to talk. No guilt, no expectations. Just us. I stare at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. I don't know what I expect from her. An apology? An acknowledgement that she spent years standing by while the rest of them dismissed me? Maybe. But there's something different in her words this time. Something that makes me hesitate. I sigh, then, before I can overthink it, I type back. Me, okay. Just us. Her response comes almost instantly. Sophie, thank you. Can I come over? I blink at the message, surprised. Sophie has never come to me before. She's always been the one to play the middle ground, staying in the comfort of our family's rules, making sure she doesn't tip the balance too much. And yet, here she is. I take a deep breath and type. Me, yeah, come over. 15 minutes later, there's a knock at my door. I hesitate for a second before standing, smoothing my sweater as I cross the room. When I open the door, Sophie is standing there, bundled in a thick coat, a scarf wrapped around her neck. Her expression is cautious, uncertain, like she isn't quite sure how I'll receive her. Hey, she says softly. Hey. For a moment, we just look at each other. Then, she lets out a breath, shaking her head. I don't even know where to start. I step aside, gesturing for her to come in. How about inside? She nods, stepping through the doorway. I close the door behind her, and she unwinds her scarf, glancing around my apartment. It's nice in here, she murmurs. Thanks. I move toward the kitchen. Coffee? She nods, and I pour us both a cup, sliding one across the counter to her before leaning against the opposite side. Sophie hesitates, wrapping her hands around the mug. Charlotte, she says finally, I want you to know that I do understand why you left. And I know I should have said something last night. I should have spoken up. I raise an eyebrow. Then why didn't you? She exhales, shaking her head. Because it's easier to pretend everything is fine than to admit that it isn't. Because if I said something, if I acknowledged how unfair it was, then I'd have to admit that this family has always been like this. And that's hard, Charlotte. It's really hard. I stare at her for a long moment, surprised by her honesty. Sophie has never been the loudest, never been the one to challenge our parents. But now, here she is, standing in my kitchen, telling me she sees it. And that means something. I take a slow sip of my coffee, then say, I appreciate that. But I need you to know something. She nods, waiting. I'm not going back to how things were, I say firmly. I won't let them treat me like that anymore. I'm done trying to squeeze into a family that won't make room for me. Sophie swallows hard, nodding. I know. I search her face, waiting for her to try to convince me otherwise. But she doesn't. Instead, she sets her coffee down and meets my gaze. Can I tell you something? I nod. She hesitates, then says, I envy you. I blink, caught off guard. What? You left. You walked away. You made a choice for yourself. She lets out a small, shaky laugh. Do you know how much I wanted to do that last night? But I couldn't. I sat there, holding my baby, pretending everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. Something tightens in my chest. Then why don't you? She smiles sadly. Because I don't know how. Silence stretches between us. Then, finally, I say, when you're ready, you can. She looks at me, really looks at me, and I think for the first time in our lives, we actually see each other. She nods slowly, then reaches across the counter, squeezing my hand. Merry Christmas, Charlotte. I squeeze back. Merry Christmas, Sophie. And for the first time in forever, it actually feels like one.